the increasing knowledge about surface water risk, and quite clearly one of the things which is really going to put that into public domain is the new National Surface Water Map, which will be publicly available, and for a lot of people it's going to show a risk they never knew existed, which really ramps it up to the level. So, you know, everybody really needs to up the game in explaining that risk and, you know, putting it into a practical context in people, how they live their lives, etc. So, really thoughts on that. The second point was one directed to Gavin, which is around from a local authority perspective, and it's, you know, it's the transparency, I think, really, in terms of how we quantify the cost of property level resilience schemes. And it's really, I think, it's that honesty issue, which is making sure that the cost of these things are more upfront, rather than what tends to be the case, which is the Ryanair policy, which is you've got a board, if you want anything in it, that's extra. And that can be quite a hurdle for people or authorities new to this, to actually understand what they're getting. Because many will budget and assume that they're getting a bit of a perfect product, when really what they're getting is a blind door that nobody would fit, for example. And I think it really is working with the contractors, the industry, the early stages, to make sure that local authorities really know what they should be asking for and what they should look for as well. And maybe there is a code of conduct, there is a sort of approach there that needs to be much more explicit in the way that particular companies bid for business and work in that arena. So again, it's one for comment and thought.
Okay, thanks a lot. I think, first of all, the Ryanair approach shouldn't happen with these 6 steps, because it's about knowing the risk and it's about having a proper survey. So if you do follow the 6 steps, that shouldn't really apply, because it's about raising standards about what should occur rather than what has occurred in the past. I think with regard to the surface water maps, again, it's just a way that the sector's emerged and how technology needs to adapt to that risk. You can't rely on flood defences, so this sector could provide a valuable role. At the moment, is it providing the role it could do? It's still developing, so this is all part of that conversation. The fact that all these different groups are in the same room together for practically the first time is also a sign that things are moving in the right direction as well. So I think the surface water maps will be a big wake-up call, and I think tying in the launch of the 6 steps to them would probably be a good way to stop a lot of mistakes occurring which could be prevented.
Yeah, thanks for the questions. On the surface water map, then I'm sure that much of my industry will want to be making use of it, but I also find at a very practical level that surface water flooding, it can still almost happen anywhere, and very small changes in buildings and hard landscaping can make big changes. So it's going to be helpful, but it's also a tool that I'd be surprised if you could always 100% rely on it in a way that we would do with fluvial and coastal maps. In terms of your question on the costings, historically, I mean, the first contracts, they simply asked for a flood barrier for a door. Then they started asking for kite-marked flood barriers. Then they had to start distinguishing between products which had installed elements and others which were just offered as a temporary solution. So, as many people, speakers have said, that the industry is developing, and also the understanding of the technology is increasing as well. And with good surveys, with a better understanding of the technology available, then the more specific the calls can be for the pricing items, and I think that will help. On the other hand, if you're too specific, then you will rule out other innovations. So it's taking a sensible balance, really, so that you can appraise one against the other where they are equivalent, but also that you don't shut out new and perhaps superior technology, which may have been overlooked as you prepare for a procurement stage. So I'd say it's a balance.
Thank you. The National Surface Water Maps, risk maps, are actually going to present us with something of a challenge, as Fran rightly says, because people will look at them and interpret them just as you would a map that shows a block of woodland on it or anything else, and if you see your area covered by it, you're going to assume that it means X, Y, and Z. And it won't. So there's a really big issue about training and telling people about what they mean. And I've already spoken to DEFRA and Environment Agency about the importance of developing a program, a dissemination program, on what these maps are going to mean, particularly for the insurance industry, because we do get lots of insurance companies, lots of underwriters, just looking at the Environment Agency data, publicly available data. They're not meant to use it, but they do use it. And they misinterpret that quite often. But this is going to be more complicated. And we need to make sure that people, whether they're in the insurance industry or in other sectors, actually understands what this data is going to mean. If we don't, the public is going to be worried. We're going to get lots of stories about it not being the right thing. It's going to be bad press in the media for Environment Agency and government in general. Anyway, I've made my point to DEFRA, I've made my point to Environment Agency, but I do think from the other big part of that to play in that is the insurance industry and flood product manufacturers as well, because understanding what it means is going to be important. Secondly, the transparency and cost issue. Quite a lot of local authorities enter into a contract for flood protection equipment for the first time. And you have some poor soul who's got to go and get this stuff going, who wanders over to their procurement department, and they talk to legal and whatever, and they go through an exercise, and at the back end of the exercise they said, I wish I had known X, Y, and Z. Because it's not quite as clear as it appears on the tin. Okay? And likewise, from the flood product manufacturer's point of view, and the installer's point of view, or people involved in that procurement process on the other side, I said, why can't we have a standardised approach where rather than going through a different set of procurement rules for every single contract we go for, or for every single local authority that wants to do something in a slightly different way. There have been some lessons learned, but I think there's a bit more for us to do, both in terms of sharing actually how to do it from a local authority point of view, but also perhaps knocking some heads together to actually make the whole process easier for everybody. Right, thank you very much. Charles.
Well, I'd just like to thank very much the three speakers here at the table for answering the questions in the way that they have done. And indeed, I'd like to thank all the speakers today who have given us, I think, a very thoughtful and important exposition of a new document which is going to be, I hope, picked up by everybody, widely disseminated, and will answer so many questions of the sort that have just been mentioned now that Paul was talking about, with the different procurement systems and the different approaches in different parts of the country. So I'd like to thank all of those. I'd also like to thank you for coming along today, particularly on a lovely day like this. It's the last time when you'd be wanting to think about flooding, but everywhere in the world, or somewhere in the world, every day, flooding is taking place, whether it's in Prague, whether it's in Melbourne, whether it's in Karachi, or anywhere else in the country, or in the world. It is a sobering fact that everywhere, that there's flooding happening everywhere, or in some part of the world every day. So I don't think there's much more for me to say, except please can you fill in your response forms, the feedback forms, before you go. It would be very much appreciated if you do so, so that we have a record of your views during the day today. So thank you all again. I hope you have a safe journey home. And could I ask you just to put your hands together, please, for all the speakers today. Thank you.